Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Knighted Ones podcast. We're now on episode number 25. We're the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, and several podcasters shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. We're happy to be back this week, and let me introduce my fellow podcasters. First up, let's bring in Mr. Tre Neal. There he is. What's up, Trey?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. It's been a while.
Yes, sir.
It's
And
been a
next up,
while.
let's bring in Mr. Josh Lazar.
Hey, that's me. And I'm on the screen and in your audio and in your speakers. That's great. I'm so glad to be last but certainly not least. And we do have someone kind of absent today, right?
Yep, no Roger today, unfortunately. He's busy with work. And as you tell, I didn't mention last but not least. That's usually Roger's job to mention that for you. So you could tell our absence there. But we got the three of us tonight. It's just going to be us three. No Ben either. So we're a little shorthanded, but we're going to be talking about obviously UCF basketball and UCF football and a couple other of the athletics at UCF. So let's get going. Let's get started, guys. First up, let's talk about UCF basketball. Obviously, last time we had spoken, I think they were coming off a win over Texas. But their latest game was a close, hard-fought battle against number 23 Texas Tech on the road. But unfortunately, they came out with the L 66-59. And I believe that was their third straight ranked opponent, not something we're used to seeing in the American. Obviously, that's life in the Big 12. So let's talk about that game. Obviously, UCF kept it close throughout most of the game. They unfortunately never led in the game, though. So Texas Tech actually had the lead from wire to wire, but UCF definitely kept it close. Darius Johnson and Sellers led the way with 14 points. Then CJ Walker off the bench there had 13 points, but he was the only Knight that actually had more than 6 points. So the offense kind of failed UCF. As usual, their defense was stingy, but not enough to beat a nationally ranked opponent on the road. So Josh, let me start with you. What did you see in that game from UCF? Were you good? Was it a moral type victory? I know we've talked about that, but it felt like a game, UCF needed. It was a game that they could have maybe had, but they unfortunately did not come away with the win. What did you see?
Yeah, so from what I saw in that game was where we are kind of as a team right now in basketball, which is close, not going over the top, right? So we're close in games. We're close to being 500. We're better than we might have thought we were at the beginning of the season, but not quite past the edge of, okay, this is a team that can go into a pretty hostile environment and take down a top 25 ranked team. Now think about that statement. Think about that if we would have thought about that at the beginning of the year or even late last year or sometime last year. We're pretty toe-to-toe. Even in the last minutes, it pulled away lightly, but it wasn't even that far away with a top 25 ranked team on the road. A top 25 ranked team on the road that shellacked Kansas in their next game. Kansas has some injuries, and Kansas is a little tired. Even Bill Self admitted that. But it's still Kansas, right? And they beat them by like 29. And this game versus us was a tight game the entire way. So I understand hating the term moral victory. But if you were to say, tight games on the road, top 25, but we just didn't pull it off, maybe after the Kansas State game, I think more people will be like, okay, I get it. I get it. And so that's just my reality. Am I upset we lost? Sure. I always want to see us win. Do I think we are a poor team because we couldn't pull it off in that environment? No, and I can't wait to see when we get the reverse of some of these games, and we have some of these teams coming home to us too. So, truthfully, I'm not happy that we lost. It's definitely a game. There was, you can see there were times where we almost could get there, but this kind of what's been happening with our teams. Sometimes we just can't get the win. And it's been an interesting road trip because not only are the men's teams at Texas and Lubbock and also in Provo and BYU, but the women's teams are too. And we'll talk about the women's team did all right over in Lubbock.
Yeah, no doubt. You make some good points there. You're right. Texas Tech just destroyed Kansas. Like you said, they had some injuries, but the fact that we're it feels like since those first couple games of the year, we've hung tough in almost every conference game outside of, Kansas State, BYU, maybe, even that had its time where it was close. So, UCF's been hanging tough, in a lot of these games. So Trey, what did you think about that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you would have, I think a lot of us said, we didn't have extremely high expectations, but we wanted to compete in every game that we could. Like, we wanted it to be competitive if we lost. And it reminds me kind of football, how we were transitioning. Like, we thought, yeah, we might lose some games. As long as we're competitive year one, there's something to build on. I think we're playing pretty competitive basketball. I don't follow it as detailed as some as you guys, but I follow our group chat very detailed. Y'all are feisty like y'all were in football. There's some expectations that we have of like a style of basketball we want to play. There's expectations of being competitive, and I think we are. I think these guys are playing tough. They're playing. They have their flaws, but I think overall, I think they're in the games. I think some of them have gotten away from us, like you mentioned, the BYU game, I believe, and the Kansas State that got away from us, and it ends, kind of lopsided. But overall, they're competing, and I think year one going into the Big 12, this is what I would have wanted, from year one. This is leaps and bounds to me more difficult than what we did in football going to the Big 12. Because this is the SEC of basketball. This is the mecca of basketball. Big 12 basketball is like all the kids are getting drafted out of here. These are where the NBA players come to play. Like that's so to come in from the American, a middling American team, at least when I was there and throughout my career, to come in and compete in the Big 12, that's what I'd expect. I have no gripes. Of course, when I'm watching, come on, like the athlete and the competitor in me takes over. And all of us, but
Yeah,
I think overall, if you would have said, a couple of months ago before the season started, hey, what do you guys expect? I remember all of our guesses were low on conference wins, but I think I would have never expected us to compete like this. So I think that's the positive in it. Again, nobody likes that was a good loss or the Power 5 loss. That's not what we want, but I think this is a positive.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's like you said, I don't think anyone expected us to be at 4 wins, 10 games into the conference schedule.
Yeah.
So 4-6, when you talk about beating Texas and beating Kansas, I think we all would have taken that gladly. I agree with a lot of what you said, Trey. We'll talk about some stats in this game. Something that keeps reoccurring for UCF basketball, their offense just isn't quite there yet. They don't have that guy that can really produce his own offense on a consistent basis. They don't have that like Jermaine Taylor or even an Aubrey Dawkins or BJ Taylor, someone like that that's really going to go, make their own shot. And we've seen it. The offense has kind of plagued them. In this game, they shot just 36% from the field and a measly 20% from three. On the flip side, they held Texas Tech pretty well. I mean, Texas Tech shot 38% and okay from three at 33%. So, the defense has been showing up. That's what's been keeping UCF in these ball games, but it's the offense that seems to go through lulls and they go through, multiple minutes in a row where they're just slumping offensively and not scoring or getting outscored by a decent margin. Also in this game, something you haven't seen too much is UCF got out rebounded. I mean, UCF's been playing pretty big. They hit the glass well offensively and defensively, but they got out rebounded 44-37. So that was a little bit of a difference in this game. And they just kept it close. They just couldn't quite, every time they got within 5 or 6 or 4, then Texas Tech would kind of extend that lead. But UCF only lost by 7. So now, as we speak, UCF is playing BYU right now on the road, and it is actually their 4th straight ranked opponent. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that. 4 straight top 25 teams in a row. So there's no break in the Big 12. There's very few easy games, if any. And you're going to have a lot of games where your opponent is ranked, or they were ranked. They have votes to be ranked. They're pretty close to being ranked, whatever the case may be. So, we really, as far as this week, are only going to cover Texas Tech because obviously we're in the BYU game right now. I think UCF is already down double digits, unfortunately. So let's talk a little bit about the prospects for the rest of UCF season. So right now, before the end of tonight's game, we are 13-9 overall, 4-6 in the Big 12. When we were coming off that last conference win, we were starting to talk a little bit about, are we going to make the tournament? We are all kind of talking about, at the very least, we're making the NIT. But with, I believe, 2 straight losses now, I think we're 3rd to last in the conference in the Big 12, which isn't really that bad of a thing considering, there were teams last year that I think in the Big 12 I was reading that were under 500 in the conference and still made the big dance. So it's not so much the standings, but it's just the fact that, at 4-6 and a lot of tough games still to come, are UCF's tournament hopes fading? Is NIT even realistic anymore? Probably is, but is the tournament, the big dance, is that fading? Josh, what are your thoughts on that?
So I really think it depends on how we end, right? Not where we are at now, but where we'll end. And to note, unless we make a big comeback from BYU right now, or a bit of a comeback, we only have 1 loss in a row. It was we beat OU and then lost to Texas Tech. We'll see what happens with BYU. But you're talking about the 4 ranked teams or previously ranked teams in a row. We're sandwiched in between 2 Cincinnati games at Cincinnati, and then next game at home will be in Cincinnati this coming week. There's even the okay teams, which right now is pretty much West Virginia and Oklahoma State, still are beating other teams. So when it comes to the NCAA tournament, I really feel like what's going to happen when we close, right? Maybe we pull off this BYU game. We'll probably know by the time we're done with this podcast, and might not talk about it, but hint at it. Say that's done. By the time you listen to it, we'll see what happens, right? But you have Cincinnati, West Virginia, Texas Tech at home, Oklahoma State. So I feel like we can get 2-ish, maybe 3 wins on there. Depends, but maybe. And then you have 2 at home versus Iowa State, which is ranked 10 currently, and Houston, which is ranked 3, and at TCU. So there is still time to do well, and a lot of good runs to get to the NCAA tournament happen when you're piling on good wins at the end of the year. So, if we can pull off 3-4 wins, maybe knock out one of those 2 home teams versus Iowa State or Houston and get 1 win in the conference tournament, maybe 2, I think it's still possibly there. But the more realistic chance of any tournament is probably the NIT, because it's 8, probably maybe even 9 teams, depending on who wins the conference tournament. It's West Virginia somehow wins the conference tournament, that's probably going to bump us up 1, if you will. So I think we're going to get 11 of the teams in this conference, and there's going to be only 2 or 3 left out of a tournament unless they want to buy their way into one. I feel like we're going to be a part of it. Now, if it's NCAA tournament, we're going to have to win. Let's forget the BYU game right now. We got 7 games left. We're going to have to win probably 4 of those, one of those being a ranked team, Houston or Iowa State. Texas Tech is probably going to be ranked again when we play them. We got to win one of those, probably 3 or 4 more in that group. And we can't just be one and done in the tournament. We have to beat someone. And if we get to 2 wins in the tournament, it might be a problem for the committee. I don't know if we'd be the last 4 in or the first 4 out, but I still think there's a chance. That's all to say. I still think there's a chance, but we have to see it. And
So
right now,
I guess correct me if I'm wrong. I know there's automatic because it's similar to football in the sense like there are auto bids, but how do like the automatic bids work with basketball? Because it's 64 teams. I don't know. I don't think there's 64 conferences. I don't think so.
No, if you win your conference, you get an auto bid though. And I don't know how many conferences are, but there's obviously more than football. So
yeah,
regardless if you're in the WAC or the MAC or anything, if you win your conference tournament at the end, not the regular season, but the playoff tournament in your conference, you get an auto bid. And then the rest is, like at large, basically.
At large. Yeah. And that's where like resume comes in. That's where who's playing like that, like who's playing the best at the right time. Like I think I'm asking because I don't know. I just look to see who they put in the bracket and I fill out my bracket. I'm not that person now.
Well, so Trey, I mean, going off that, I mean, what do you think UCF's tournament hopes are fading, or they have a chance there? They need to obviously win some games. There's some work to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance, just kind of like what Josh was saying. We have the schedule to do it. I mean, if we get hot, say we beat Iowa State, we beat Houston. Not saying that it's extremely likely, but again, it could happen, and I think those are good wins. Again, I don't know exactly how they do it, but if you can start hot, obviously you win the tournament. That's the best way to get in. But with us, just middling around the middle, like Josh says, this is a great conference of basketball. I think we've seen that. I think at our best, I think we could be a fringe tournament team. We could be a tournament team at our best. I think that counts for something in basketball. I think that matters because that's what you want. You want the good games. You want the Cinderella teams to be seeded that could give the Kansas the run for their money. If we've shown we can give these teams that are projected to win the national championship, we can beat them. I think, and basketball is it's one and done, man. The hot team can make the run. So I think we could, if we could get on the run, like you said, right now it's not looking too good. But if we can, get hot at the right time, who knows? I think we can make something shake. I think NIT, not a lock, I don't know, but I think we could be in the NIT for sure. But I think for the tournament, if we get hot, we can make it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Go ahead. Sorry, Josh.
I was going to say a couple of things. So there are 32 auto bid teams in the NCAA tournament. And as a reminder, we talked about in the podcast a little bit. The NIT is a little different this year. The NIT is the top. So if you are a conference championship and don't go to the NCAA tournament or something, or regular season champion and don't go to the NCAA tournament, which is 0.0% chance happening in our conference champions not winning their conference tournament or not selected the NCAA basketball. That's not happening in this conference. Exactly. So outside of that, it's the guaranteed 2 teams from the 6 conferences, which were now included in that. The top 2 teams in net rankings not qualifying for the NCAA tournament. So if you're talking 8 or 9 teams that are going to be in the NCAA tournament, more than likely from this conference, that means the 2 teams. If it's not us, it's probably West Virginia, TCU, Oklahoma State, and us. More than likely, maybe one other above there if we need 9, right? So basically, if we have 8, we have 10 out of the 14 teams going. So we need to be not the bottom of the 4 teams.
And I think right now we're at 4, right?
Right now we have 4 wins, and I was looking at rankings before. So what I would say is this: we have a really good shot, especially if we keep winning. If to get to a tournament to play for more, net rankings are going to be big, and beating ranked teams are going to be big. But we have enough. We do so much better at home, and almost everyone in this conference does. Like, it's exponentially better. We have enough at-home opportunities against teams we are competitive against or should be competitive against that I feel like we have a shot. So I don't think it's way off.
Yeah. So here's some, for the rest of the way. First of all, right now, as it stands, UCF is 64 in the KenPom rankings. So that would put them as a fringe tournament team, like Josh made the first 4 in or last 4 out, somewhere around there. And right now UCF is 2-6 in as far as quad 1 games and 2-2 in quad 2 games. And they still have, I believe, if I counted correctly, 4 more quad 1 games. So they could potentially get to almost 500 in quad one games if they were to win out. Obviously, that's probably not realistic, but the point is they have a chance to really beef up their schedule or beef up their wins and put themselves in a position where they have to get an at-large bid. And kind of to my earlier point about last year's tournament. So last year, the Big 12 had 7 teams make the tournament. Only one that had more was the Big 10, where actually had 8. But Iowa State made the tournament at 19-14, 9-9 in the conference. West Virginia made the tournament at 19-15 and 7-11 in the conference. 4 games under 500, they made it. And a lot of that was bolstered by they had some good quad one wins. So UCF doesn't necessarily have to win out or do anything crazy. I think if they can maybe go 4-3, even maybe 3-4, but those 3 wins are against quad one teams, or some of them are, I think they have a chance at that at-large bid. And then if they win a game or 2 in the Big 12 tournament, that means a couple other probably really quality wins that are going to happen. So, UCF's chances are there. I guess the question is, can they do it? They've shown at times, they can beat some really good teams, but these last few games, they've just been kind of like Josh said in the beginning, they've been close, but right there, but they just haven't been able to get over the hump and get those wins. So, we'll see what UCF basketball can do. They still have a chance. Tonight's is not looking good so far.
It's getting better. It's getting better. We're only down by 4 on the under 4 TV timeout in the first half. We've been making some dunks and some layups. We were down by like 14 at one point. So it's slowly been getting a little bit better. I will say one other point, and maybe we'll move on after that. We were talking just NIT for theoreticals. Let's just say there's 8. Let's just say that 8 of the top in net are going in right now. That's huge. So listen to this top 5 in net rankings for this conference. Houston at 1, BYU at 8, team we're currently playing away. And man, that would be a great if we could pull it off on the road. Iowa State at 9, Baylor at 13, Kansas at 12. That was previous. Like now Kansas is 17. But that's the top 5 teams, all within the top 17 teams in the entire NCAA. It's so then we go from there. We have Texas Tech. Texas Tech is 26, Oklahoma's 31, Texas 34, Cincinnati's 35. So if you go 8 teams and just say those are the ones that get in, 8 teams would be at Texas. We have Cincinnati, TCU, and UCF at 35, 42, and 67 collectively, and Kansas State's actually below us at 77. If we get 9 teams in and we keep playing within reason, there doesn't seem to be any reason why we couldn't get to the NIT. But if it's only 8 teams, then we got to beat Kansas at home, right? We can't stumble up against Oklahoma State and West Virginia, who are like 137, 154. And we have to pick one of Iowa State, Houston, maybe even TCU if we're close to win. TCU on the road at 42, I think it ends up as a quad 1 win. So we need to pick up some more wins. But that's what I'm saying. Are we an NCAA tournament team? Probably not right now. But the opportunity is still there. We just have to seize it. And so far, we're at least doing a little bit better in the game that's happening live as we record right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no game is given, but when you look at UCF's next 4 games, they have a chance to really at least beef up their record. These won't be quad 1 wins, but they got Cincinnati, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and then Oklahoma State. So those are 4 of the more, bottom teams in the conference. So, you win all 4 of those, all of a sudden you're at 17 wins. And if you can grab a win in one of those last 3, and then, there's a path to 20 wins here that exists. Yeah. It's unlikely, but they can look, they almost already beat Cincinnati, and that was on the road, and now they got them at home. There's no reason why they can't beat West Virginia, who's 8-16. Texas Tech, we already almost beat them. They're coming into our house. And then they got Oklahoma State, who is the worst team in the conference. So I don't see why they couldn't pick, go on a little 4-0 run here. Nothing's guaranteed, but there's a chance. So yeah, I think but all that being said, NIT is more realistic. But once again, though, I think in the beginning of the year, if you would have said, "Hey, UCF's going to pick up a couple huge wins or a historic win over Kansas," and then make it to the NIT and be pretty competitive in almost every Big 12 game, most of us would have been like, "Wow, that's a very big surprise for year one."
Yeah, 100%. It's amazing and it's great. That's why I'm putting Roger hat on. Roger hat would be very annoyed and angry that we lost and we couldn't go over the top. And I agree with that too, right? Just putting Roger hat on. 100% agree with that. But I've been beaten down as a old school UCF fan who only had moral victories, and I was around when we had the best 0-3 football team in the nation because we only got slightly. We were leading in halftime versus Scott Frost, Nebraska. Like that's the UCF fan I have grown up as. So this to me is, yes, we want to see more, but pretty darn good. Like
look how Roger is with basketball. I'm with the football team. My expectation for football are way higher. Basketball, I've never once had expectations. I've seen, and I know Ben would probably get mad at this, but I've seen one, at least since I've started watching UCF sports, 2007. So we're going on here, 15 years, whatever it is. I've seen UCF basketball have one special season, and it was the year that they won the tournament game and nearly beat Duke. But every year has been very average, below average. I mean, they literally have never won a conference championship in Conference USA, American. I think the best they ever did was maybe third in the standings. So it wasn't like, even when they were in leagues that were, way inferior to the Big 12, they never really did much. So I never really had high expectations. To me, what we're doing now in the Big 12, I think this is way more special than almost any single year we had in the American, obviously outside of the tournament year, because you had the games against the Tulsas and the Tulanes and, and Temple, which you just don't have in this conference. And, so for me, I think this is way above expectations, better than anything we've done. And especially when you talk about some of the players that, didn't return from last year's team that were a big part, and there's a lot of new pieces this year. It was a transition year and a lot of transfers again. So you didn't really go into the season thinking you had that one really special talent, but it's been kind of the collection of talent has really gelled really nicely, and they've come together and played really good defense and just been able to hang tough in every game. And I think the home crowd this year has brought it in every single game. That always gives UCF an edge and almost in every sport, especially football and basketball, though. That gives us an edge. And I think, UCF fans may be a little fickle at time, but when we play a good opponent, which in the Big 12 is going to happen almost every night, they're going to bring it. And that's why you've seen us play so good at home, but that's seemingly carried over on the road for quite a few games. So, I'm excited about how this season's went and where it's going. Anything else, guys, you want to contribute on basketball?
Just briefly. So my fandom from basketball comes back to like the late 90s when I was a student. So I remember vividly a lot of the Kirk's jerks and a lot of the really good Kirk Spearaw years where back-to-back championships. But here's the thing. I remember the conference championships. I remember watching us on I was in a fraternity and we were at a retreat and I was watching the UCF versus Pittsburgh game on a really, really tiny TV. I was happy that they had ESPN on, right? So I remember those things, but the reality was, unless you were here about that time, you were right. The Conference USA and American was just not typically good. There were spurts. There was the AJ Ramsa, Marcus Jordan, when we got a couple guys down from Chicago Whitney Young. I got to pull that.
Yeah,
basketball.
Whitney Young, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That's what Marcus and AJ are from. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had that when they were here, there were streaks of like 10. We beat UF in a basketball game in the currently the Kia Center, right? So there were some really big ups, but there weren't like the enduring things. This just feels like if we can continue not only the momentum for this year and what's going on in this season, but can continue that, imagine the fans that are going to buy tickets after that are freshmen or sophomore this year and watch us beat Kansas and watch us beat Oklahoma, who are really getting engaged with the frenzy, I guess, instead of frenzy. Like, this is what creates long-term fans. It's these type of experiences. So I wish you had more of that, Alan, and Trey, although we were pretty good when you were here, Trey. But I wish you had more of that, Alan. But the great part is the reason a lot of us, quote, older fans were so excited to just get a seat at this power table is because we knew what would happen when we got there. And you're seeing the fruits of that labor from men's tennis to even basketball was starting. We're seeing some of the growth. That audience participation, the fans showing up at home games, like that used to be the one game. That used to be Memphis at home. Or when someone else came into town. Now it's like every conference game, there's 6,000 to 8,000 people, and it's loud. So I think this is going to yield a lot of future dividends, no matter what happens in this game right now that's happening and in the season period.
Yeah, and let's not forget, it kind of already is translating into recruiting. I mean, outside of Taylor Hendricks, UCF basketball hasn't had too many, big time recruits, but the 2024 class already has a 4-star that we signed in Kyle Green. And then in 2025, UCF has a verbal commitment from a 4-star center and had a 5-star recruit on campus for the 25 class. So it does seem like it already is, paying some dividends there. So that's UCF basketball. Not much today. Obviously, they are in game right now. We'll see what happens maybe by the end of the conference. Or by the end of the podcast. So let's shift a little bit into UCF football. Obviously, not a ton of news there either. As you know, it is the kind of middle of the offseason right now. The transfer portal has the window is closed for right now. We're still obviously close to 2 months away from the spring game. But yeah, in spring ball, exactly. But there was a little bit of news. We did pick up last week when Coach Malzahn was announcing the transfer class. That was also the original National Signing Day, which has become completely irrelevant with the early signing day. But UCF did pick up one more 2024 recruit. He is a preferred walk-on, which usually we don't cover a ton of preferred walk-ons, but this guy was a little bit interesting. His name is Tyreek Robinson. He's out of Bradenton in Florida. Good program. He's a defensive tackle, 6'1", 318 pounds. And he's a top 100 recruit in the state. Actually had some big time offers. LSU was on there, Ole Miss, quite a few Big Ten schools. I don't know if he slipped under the radar or he just waited until obviously this, the National Signing Day now is already when a lot of teams have pretty much filled up their entire class. They probably don't have room. So he might've just waited too long. So we kind of got a guy for quote unquote a steal. We didn't have to use a scholarship on him, but he's clearly a scholarship player. I mean, he had some like 18, FBS offers, quite a few Power 4 offers. So that was a big pickup. Did you guys see anything about Tyreek Robinson?
Yeah, I mean, what it looks like, I mean, again, top 100 kid in Florida, pipeline state. I don't know if it had to be something because it clearly wasn't his skill. He has an impressive offer list. It's probably, it could be something they don't know if he's going to qualify. So teams kind of get cold feet. And then again, you kind of just, I can qualify, coach. I got the grades. I'm doing this, or I got my SATs back and they're good. Now and then you just fall into maybe a diamond in the rough. I think that's what kind of happened because again, he was a top 100 kid. I mean, he has Auburn, Colorado, some 20 offers is what it looks like. So he
Miami, Texas.
He wasn't a kid that's just, a guy that nobody knows about. He was a known guy. And probably that's what my guess would be. It would be something with either grades or SAT, like a test that they might have been scared of him qualifying for, something like that. I don't think anything else. The reason why he should have signed probably that first signing day early. I mean, some of these offers, he probably could have signed that early if they weren't worried about something. So, I mean, it looks like a good player though. Yeah. Ratings wise, I mean, I haven't seen any film on there or anything, but He's
Big
rated
kid,
pretty
too.
highly. Yeah. He's stout. I mean, I'm looking at his picture. He's a big kid already, so he's going to gain probably 15, 20 more pounds. He'll be a monster.
Josh, did you see a little bit about Robinson?
I to be honest, I unfortunately did not. I heard that we picked someone up who was a preferred walk on. That really sounded like it shouldn't have been one. That was a 6'1",
Yeah.
318. It's a big dude. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm almost 3. It's not.
He's
But
got Texas, USC, Miami. I mean, these are some football schools.
and maybe I know sometimes there's committable offers and not committable
Yes,
offers, but
for
still,
sure.
it's even if it's like a, hey, we can get you on as a preferred walk-on type of deal, this is the difference between UCF in the Big 12 and UCF in the MAC, right? In the MAC, this kid's not coming. I don't care. Well, maybe if you have a Gus Malzahn, if you will, in the MAC, but UCF in the Big 12 allows us to do a lot of things that we were not able to do in Conference USA in the American. And that is why I think a lot of other schools really didn't want us to elevate as we have, especially some of the ones southwest of us and others maybe a little more north of us. But the reality, and who cares about the one down in your neck of the woods, Alan and Trey? They haven't been good in 20, 30 years.
20 years, yep.
But the reality is, the reality is that this is the type of things we can do now that we have a seat at the table, and hopefully that seat stays warm. It doesn't go away anytime soon.
Yeah, and a little bit more about Robinson before we move on. I mean, he definitely had some serious looks. I mean, he visited Florida, he visited Miami, visited USC, and got offers from all those besides Florida. Then he had a bunch of other offers: Cincinnati, Colorado, Central Michigan. So he was definitely getting some looks. Last year, he had a pretty solid year. He had 47 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 7 QB hurries, and a sack. And the year before that, he had kind of similar stats, had 5 tackles for loss as a junior, and 9 QB hurries. So he's been a gamer. He's at Manatee High. I believe UCF has had a couple of recruits from Manatee in the past, but it's keeping that Central West, Central Florida pipeline open. So it's good to see. He's a top 700 national recruit.
Yeah,
81.
He's a high 3-star.
Almost exactly. And so I think it's a good pickup, especially for 2 reasons. One, we said we don't have to use a scholarship on him. And 2, he's actually the only defensive tackle in the entire 2024 class. So I'm pretty sure UCF got at least one player at every single position, and besides defensive tackle, that's the only position that UCF did not land a prospect. So for them to get him last minute, and a guy that's not some diamond in the rough guy that was getting overlooked, that's a pretty big pickup. And it's like Josh said, I guess that's life in the Big 12. You're able to do things you weren't able to do before, get a high 3-star to come on as a preferred walk-on, and if he's any good, I'm sure they'll obviously convert him to a scholarship player. But
and there's so many workarounds nowadays with NIL, and there's so many just different ways that preferred walk-on, you're you're not on scholarship, but I mean, I think they said Mikey Williams on the basketball team, he's going to be a preferred walk-on. There's so many different loopholes and ways. There were loopholes when I was in college. Now we have free give money away. There's plenty of loopholes. I'm sure they're going to find a way for the kid to come out and not have to worry about it. So it's interesting because, again, I don't think you're not finding high-level 3-stars just sitting on trees as preferred walk-ons. I don't care really who you are. And they don't even really go to big-time schools for that. So it's a get, and it's quote-unquote free. It's not costing us anything. So definitely take it.
Yeah. So the other bit of news when it comes to UCF football is the NFL combine is coming fairly soon here, and UCF has had 2 players invited to the combine, which are Javon Baker and Tylen Grable. Grable, I think, had been invited for a while now. Baker was someone that was just recently invited. he obviously, we had the whole back and forth with him. He was staying, announced he was staying, then he was leaving, then we thought he was staying, and then he finally is leaving. But obviously had a great Senior Bowl. He turned a lot of heads in the Senior Bowl. Kind of shot up draft boards really in the last couple weeks. And now Baker has that hard work rewarded with a combine invite. So UCF has a very good chance of having, it looks like 2 players drafted. I was very surprised Tre Neal wasn't invited after the year that he had, all conference first team. Seemed like a little bit of a snub, but I would assume that he has a chance of maybe being a final day draft pick, or maybe at least a get a camp invite of some sort.
Yeah, he'll be high priority probably.
Yeah, high priority. And then the other bit of news with the combine, just as it relates to UCF, is Matt Lee and Tatum Bethune were also invited. I saw obviously former UCF players, Bethune over at FSU and Lee over at Miami, both had solid, second parts of their career there at other schools, and they both got invited. But we'll more so talk about Baker and Grable. Where do you guys see them, potentially getting drafted if they get drafted?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Baker, I think he has the ceiling of probably a high, kind of where Traquan Smith maybe a little bit better. I think, third round grade. I think that's fair for his height. I've always said it's gonna be contingent on how he runs. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest guy. He doesn't have that AK speed or like blazing speed. But I think, if he can go out there and run a mid 4.4, high 4.4, kind of that's what Traquan Smith ran. I think he ran 4.49. If he can do that, he's gonna get drafted because he makes a great catches. He has a great catch radius. He runs very good routes for his size. And he's fast. If he can show that he's fast and be NFL fast, what they want, I think he will get drafted at a high, third round, which that's great money, and he drafted anywhere. But, that first couple of days is where you really want to be because you kind of lock in your roster spot without having to really earn it. They're investing in you. So I think if he can do that, so I think it's going to be contingent on, how he runs at the combine. If he doesn't, I get it too, because again, he was a later kind of invite. I don't know if that's what he's been solely training. He was at the Senior Bowl. That kind of throws a wrench into the routine of how you train, because Senior Bowl prep versus combine prep is completely different. Senior Bowl prep is football. Combine prep is essentially track. It's 2 different things. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see if he runs, if he's comfortable. Because again, that 40 it's so non-important, but it's so important at the same time. Like, if you go out there and run a blazing fast 40 at the combine, it's going to go viral everywhere. People won't forget. Some people draft you just because you run fast. You might not even be good at football. They'll draft you because of that. But again, if you go out there and you run super slow, it's like a huge red flag for people, because again, what kind of what receivers do we know are super slow receivers outside of like the legend of Jerry Rice, where people say he runs a 4.7. Realistically, he ran a 4.4, but they say that. But yeah, I think that's huge for him specifically. Tylen Gamble, I don't really know the nuances of O-line play, what gets him drafted. I know a lot of it is, projecting, because it's hard to find. Yeah, it's hard to find good O-linemen with great technique and are big. I think a lot of it's so picky, which I don't like about it, but I get it. They want to see, how big you are, how fast you run, how strong you are, things like that. But there's so many guys that slip in the draft because people weigh that so much, and I feel like guys like, Gabe Davis slips to the 4th round because of that kind of stuff. He doesn't run the fastest 40, but he does a lot of the dirty work that people don't want to do. He does a lot of things like that. So it'll be interesting, specifically for Baker. And a lot of these guys, just because you don't get drafted, they could still have a shot to get not drafted because they don't get combine invites. They can still get drafted if they have a great pro day. I think Morris Brash could be one of those guys who could be a late round guy, kind of like Kalia Davis. I know he went to the draft, or he went to the combine, but I don't think he ran because he was hurt that year.
Yeah.
But his film was just great, because at the end of the day, how good of a football player are you? That's what the real people that know football, that's what they care about. So I think there's guys who have that, that end of the tunnel, that backdoor shot to sneak in and get drafted. Because we have good players, and I think they have a shot. I think there's a possibility those guys can go.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Josh, what do you think? Where they get drafted?
So I'm thinking, as of the information we have now, right? We have Baker, turning some heads at the Senior Bowl. And Grable, he's 6'7", was he like probably 310 or more.
And he's pretty athletic too.
He's the prototypical height and weight, and probably will do all the things in the combine and measurables that a team will want an offensive lineman. I would say definitely for Baker, because of what he's shown out, based on what we've seen. I think you're about right that third round, fourth round, there's a lot of wide receivers in the draft.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's very, very, very deep wide receiver draft. And it's interesting because offensive linemen and linemen end up going way earlier than like running backs did a while back. Right? Like about 10 years ago, maybe even 15, running backs were pretty plentiful in the top. And now it's a select few. And the running back position is unfortunately on the NFL side
devalued.
Way devalued. I mean, for the rare Saquon Barkleys you have like 18 other offensive and defensive linemen.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the starting running back of the back-to-back champs Chiefs was a 7th round pick, and he's a good football player. It's just
he's good at Rutgers too.
Yeah, and when guys see that, they're like, "Oh, I can get a starting quality running back in the 7th round. Why take the Saquon Barkleys?" Which it sucks because there's a drastic difference between like Saquon and Isaiah Pacheco. No shade to him, but it's a value thing. And the O linemen like Tyler Gamble, they are so hard to find good O linemen. It's so hard, so that just naturally drives the value up. So.
Yeah. And it's that offensive line within a scheme that blocks well, that can make holes big enough for various different wide receivers or running quarterbacks, which happened a lot in the Super Bowl too, right? So to me, Baker probably 3rd or 4th round based on what we know, but he might just turn out something insane on a pro day with like a 4.24.
But if he does that, it's going to shoot him up the boards, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Perryman was the person I was thinking of top of my head. Like Perryman basically became a millionaire with a pro day, and good for him, right? And even now, like what 6-8 years later, you see.
I mean, he played almost a decade, I think, just off of the strength of him running so fast, because that's something you can't teach. So they're always gonna need it. So you always have a job for 10 years just to run fast. Sign me up.
And that's and he's still in the NFL. He's still kind of journeyman status, but still catching balls, right? So that's where I think Baker is. Crable's going to be interesting because my instinct is feeling like 5th or 6th round, like 3rd day, right? But if he again does something off the charts on his measurables, he's going to go right up the line. It might be even higher than Baker, which it seems weird, but it's a deep wide receiver draft, and it's good offensive linemen are worth a lot of money, and they should be, because the trenches really do win you championships and games, and they that's Josh Sitton, old UCF football player with a ring too for Green Bay. Like
Green Bay,
I think he had a year or two where he gave up no sacks, and it was like 2 years.
He was a beast.
Josh
Sitton was a beast.
He was, and still in the state somewhere, I believe. But that's you can pay for that, but imagine getting that type of 1, 2, 3 year player in that rookie contract that's pretty decent and helps with everything else, and finding something like that, diamond minding maybe for the NFL. So I think both are going to do well for themselves. I wish them the best of luck. I'd love to see more than 2 players get drafted. I don't know if that's going to happen, but those 2 I think are going to be between
our best
rounds
shots.
3 and 5. They have a good shot.
Yeah. No doubt about it. So we'll see what happens with Baker and Grable in the draft, and we'll see what UCF always has a handful of guys that become undrafted free agents as well. So I'm sure we'll have a couple of that this year. But nice after what we didn't have anyone drafted last year, so to get back on the draft board will be nice. So all right, the kind of final thing we had when it comes to college football, news broke today that ESPN and the CFP, the College Football Playoff, have agreed on a new 6-year deal worth $1.3 billion annually. That basically allows UCF allows ESPN to keep the exclusive rights of the 12-team playoff through the 2031 season. This was largely expected. I think we all knew ESPN kind of had a stranglehold on the playoff. And but the interesting part of that is that right now the current deal, which really only runs through the next 2 seasons. So obviously we all know next year the playoff is changing from a 4-team model to a 12-team model, which will be the 6 conference winners and then 6 at-large bids. But now with that, was that?
For now, it's probably going to be 5-7 by the end of the summer.
Right. I was just going to say there's a vote that's going to happen. It looks like they're aiming for February 20th that would change it to a 5-7 model, which would, then have the 5 highest ranked champions and then 7 at-large bids, which I think most people are unanimous. That's what's best. That still allows for 1 auto bid for the group of 5. So we get rid of that whole mess of leaving them out and all the complaints that obviously teams like UCF went through for a number of years. But eliminates there being 2 group of 5 champions that make the playoffs. So there'll be 1 there, and then potentially looking at a 5+7 model. So I mean, not a ton of surprise here. I think we all knew ESPN and the CFP were going to extend this deal. It now just comes down to what does that playoff model look? It looks like the current construction of it, of the 6-6, is probably only going to be for 2 seasons, and then that's going to switch. It's just what does that look like, and really what does the future look like after that? I mean, there's a lot of talks. There's the threat of the Power 2, obviously, which now it's kind of being renamed, and the goalposts are being moved again with the Big Ten, the SEC. Will they break off and start their own CFP? What does it mean for college basketball? Does that tournament expand even more? Does some of the power conferences in there, like the Big 12, do they break off and do their own thing? So a lot of, really the landscape of college athletics has forever changed just over the past 2-3 years alone. But it looks like a lot more. This is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to change on the horizon. What do you think about that, Josh?
Well, I really wish we would have gotten, well, I wouldn't say a more competitive process. It sounds like everyone and their parent wanted to have this and were willing to pay for it, from streaming partners to linear. Everyone wanted a piece of this puzzle. And so a couple things from the articles that are public. The CFP executive director Bill Hancock told the Associated Press negotiations are continuing. So who's to say what's actually happening right now? But I tend to believe this is where ESPN wants to be. So here's the deal. I think it's not the best thing for UCF. I think having competition, especially since our current broadcast partners are a partnership between ESPN and Fox, I think it'd be better if we had both of those facilitators of college football funding to be a part of this puzzle. Fox, NBC, Warner Brothers Discovery, every streaming platform expressed interest. There's also this combined merger, is it Fox, Warner Brothers, and ESPN that's doing this other streaming piece that they're working on too. So there's so many pieces to this puzzle. I'd say, as I say in my business, until a contract is signed, I'll believe it until I see it. So I news is one thing. ink on paper or digital signature is another thing. So let's yes, Alan is putting me first all the time, and I love this as Roger in the background is trying to shade me if you're watching this on YouTube. But this is not the best thing for UCF, but because we are now in at least the higher echelon, we should see more money from it. Now, I will say, Alan, the last thing you did allude to this Power Two and the maybe the agreement that the Big 12 has. Sorry, I wish the Big 12, the Big 10 has with the SEC. And there's actually a great article about it, which we might dip our toes into. That came out in Yahoo Sports by Ross. Was it Ross Dellinger, I believe? Put this out. Was it today? Oh, it was today too. The future of the NCAA tournament and CFP. Everything your Mark is hearing allegedly from that article is that this is just a discovery mission to do what's best for us all, if you will. And his as the article stated, it was he heard of this agreement to work together with benign involvement. Like, he didn't think this was anything more than what it was. So we'll see what happens with that too. But if you take your Mark's thoughts and word there, and the idea that those two Power Two, or whatever you want to call them, are really just trying to keep people in the framework that's what's best for those that are bringing in these dollars, then we might ultimately benefit. But once we get to the 12 playoff spots, I think that's what's going to be key for a lot of things.
Yes.
Even going back to the conversation we had earlier with our preferred walk-on, right? If you go all the way back, right, to Tyreek Robinson, well, okay, he can go to any school he wants probably, and he'll probably earn a scholarship at some point if he does well.
Yep.
But what schools would have a legitimate shot of being in that top 12 teams? And that keeps going further and further and further down, especially if you go with the top 5 conferences. You're probably looking at, the Power 4 and probably the American,
maybe.
Because last year the Sun Belt destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So and then if it's one of those two, the rest are going to be filled. I'd say 9 times.
I'm not going to those schools.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. Yeah. So going all the way back to that, I think all of these things, whether it's the billions of dollars that's going to college football, the CFP, or whatever the heck happens to the NCAA tournament, where the 6 best basketball teams, you add Big East into there too, take 70% or more of the credits from that tournament, something is going to have to change. And I think it's going to be mostly to the benefit of UCF. But I really wish I would have had some diversity in the linear or even streaming plays, because I just feel like we could have made more money. But everyone loves being on ESPN, and that's us included, not ESPN.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we've been saying kind of for the whole season, we're starting to see what I think is going to be the end of kind of what we grew up with college football. We're already seeing the changes early. Like right now, when we look back, say 50 years from now, these are like the baby steps of what's going to be, I think, 50 years from now. I think we got to experience the end of what we thought was great college football, and now we're experiencing the first steps of amateurism, minor league football, minor league basketball. Not the overseas, but like Americanized, where college, the student athlete will change its meaning. I think we're seeing the beginning of it. And I think it's huge benefit. I'm just going to speak for football. I think this is going to be an opportunity for us to, not a make or break, but I think we have to be competing for a college football playoff spot within this next few time frame. This time frame before I think it breaks off, which could be 5 to 10 years before they're just like, we're going minor league football. So I think UCF has to get to that conversation. I think we need to compete for Big 12 championships to get these automatic bids, because I think when it breaks off, if there's just the Big 10 and Big 12 or Big 10 and the SEC, they're not just going to roll with what they have now. I think they're going to have to pick from everywhere because they want to cover everywhere. They're not just going to leave, some of these West Coast teams out. They want to cover the entire country with teams. And I think they're going to just go to, hey, who's the best teams, who draws the biggest crowd, who causes the most riffraff. Because let's be honest, UCF is more known than Mississippi State. Mississippi State is just kind of lucky to be in the SEC. They kind of have that. They're just tagging along, grabbing by the tails, going for the ride. I think that's why if we can start winning games, if we can start competing for national championships, really like be in the thick of the madness, because 12 teams is a whole different window. It's going to be a lot of at-large. It's going to be the conference champs, like you say, and then it's going to be, all right, who has the best resume? Who's beating the best teams? It's going to be similar to basketball. And I think UCF has a chance with its location, its pool of a market. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know Orlando's a big market. I know we have a big school, big campus. We're on the up with as far as what we can be. I think that's a draw. I think they're projecting out forward. They see UCF in 20 years getting all this money, recruits in a pipeline state. They can project out. But I think at the end of the day, we have to win. I think that's what got us to the Big 12 in the initial part, was there was that spark in the bottle where we're winning. We were great in football. We were really good that one basketball season. We were great in softball. We were great in soccer. Like, I think all in that time frame, we were really good at a lot of sports, which propelled us to the Big 12. I think it's going to have to be something similar, going forward. Not saying we're going to stay in the Big 12 forever, but like if we do, me and Roger have said, I think the next step is going to be in that SEC, or what turns to be that amateur football. To project into that, we got to win. We have to perform. We're not winning a national championship every year, but be in the conversation, be in the conversation of a top 12 to 15 program, which I think that's always been the goal. I don't know the financials and all the, I call that the smart people talk as far as the money and all that, like what they're talking about in the article we were talking about, but it's important. I think at the end of the day, we have to win in every sport. We have to be competitive in every sport, so that we can take that next step, whether that's still with the Big 12 or with whatever the future is. I want to be a part of it. I want UCF to be a part of it. And the best way to do that, win games in every sport. Win softball, win basketball, win football, win baseball, win everything. That's what we have to do. So,
yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we know that college has changed a lot, and it's going to keep on changing. So, yeah. Well, speaking of these other programs that also need to be good alongside football and basketball, let's get into a quick update on some of UCF's other athletic programs. I know we want to talk a little bit about softball. Trey, you're the softball guru, so I'll let you get into a little softball, UCF softball.
Yeah, so we, as everybody knows, my wife played softball here when I was here playing football. So, I kind of live. If you ask me what's my favorite sport outside of football, softball has my heart, because I was there through, I'm there every game as much as I can supporting. So we watch. And this year, I don't know if you guys know, a couple of years ago when we had that, that Tourney run where we were hosting, then we won ours and we went to the super regionals. A lot of that core, they were young, sophomores, freshmen. Well, 2 years later, now they're juniors and seniors. So we have a great core of girls this season. And this is probably the best core, I think, coming through altogether, just from what they've done to their skill set, how good they are. They've all played 3-4 years, and they're starting out the season hot. They're 4-1 to start it out. A lot of good depth on both sides with a healthy blend of like young people and some transfers. They're blending it in perfectly. And Coach Malone is doing a great job, I think, early of just integrating everybody. Letting some of these freshmen play, get them, get their feet wet. I've always talked about in football, there's nothing like college football until you play it. I think the same thing goes for the other sports. There's nothing like, college softball going up against these good teams until you get out there and play them. So she's sprinkling in these freshmen to play, some sophomores to play, get their feet wet, because now we're in the Big 12. I don't know if people are familiar. Oklahoma is probably the softball dynasty right now. They are beating everybody and they're beating them badly. Yes, it's not close for the most part. So we're going to be playing them. That's the conference. They have Oklahoma State, very good softball team. Oklahoma's very good softball team. Texas, a lot, like it's a very, very good softball conference. Probably tied with, if not better than the SEC, which has a lot of teams too. And yeah, so I think that's what we're going against. And Coach Bear Malone is great as far as scheduling the team, because this past weekend, we went 4-1. And this was more of a warm up, because now we're going to the Clearwater Invitational with the likes, again, North Carolina, Wisconsin, number 14, Kentucky, Northwestern, UCLA. All these teams are very high level teams. Follow that up the next week. They're going to California. They're playing Oregon, number 17, number 11, Missouri, number 3, Tennessee. All of these teams, I think we will know how good of a team we are by how we play them. Because softball is different. It's similar to basketball, I think, at least as far as how they get the tournament teams. We want to be hosting at the end of the day. The best way to do that, play good teams, beat good teams, or lose closely to really good teams. Get your RPI up, or I don't know what that means, but I know it's significant. And Coach Malone, she's scheduled, hey, you guys want to go to the College World Series? You got to play College World Series level teams. We're going to do that in conference, but you also need to do that, when you're uncomfortable in the middle of the week. That's what I think is shaping up to be. This could be a special season again, reminiscent of 2 years ago where we were in the Super Regionals. I think this team could be better. The only question mark really will be obviously health, and do we have the pitching? We have the depth, but do we have the high level pitching needed to advance to a College World Series? Because 2 years ago we did, but when you run into the buzzsaw of Oklahoma, you see how good really these girls are. And I think once you do that, if our pitchers can do that, hey, I think we can make a run. It's just going to be, hey, it's going to be about staying healthy, and can our pitchers elevate, and that's going to be key. So that's my little spiel about, the softball team. It's fun. If people haven't watched it, I always say it's a lot more entertaining. No shade to baseball, but baseball is very long. They're trying their way to make it speed it up, but there's a lot more nuance in small ball, and softball is a little bit more fast. And it's not as long. It's 7 innings. If to me, it always flies by. It's never fast, and it's exciting. There's slappers, there's home run hitters. This team that we have is really good. If anybody can go watch them, I don't know if there's, big softball fans. They're very good. We have a couple of girls that they played on the the underage USA team. Jada Cody, she's a stud. I can go on and on, but just go check them out, man. They're a really good bunch of girls. So.
I'll try to do that if I'm in town. They have in their schedule, sometimes it is during the day, and for someone that has to be on campus often during the day, I might have to do that. So
you should do it during because they play they play number 2. They got to go to Oklahoma State, number 4 team in the country. This is the conference play. Then Texas, who's the number 2 team in the country right now, comes. This is like mid-March. Then Oklahoma. They play Houston, Oklahoma. Some of these games, man, I'm going up to them 1,000%. But these are the week. Once you get into conference, it's just weekend series. It's just Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with maybe one game sprinkled in during the week. But yeah, man, it's awesome to watch how, because I talk to my wife about it all the time. Like, y'all were good when we were here, but these girls are no shade, but they're another level. They're a whole different kind of beast. And it shows with the way Coach Malone just trains them, and how serious she is with them, and how she treats them. That's what we want. We want to be competitive in every sport possible. This is what we want. So, I think they're taking that next step. Hopefully, they can.
So 2 things, Trey. If you want to take your wife to a wonderful Valentine's Day date, you can go to watch the softball team play Liberty on Valentine's Day at 6 p.m.
Yeah, I might have to.
Drive on. There's good steak places you go to too. So I know most people have heard of Oklahoma as a softball team and how good they are. But
Mhm.
Ryan Aber from the Oklahoman published an article today that is mind-blowing. And the title is, How Many Times Has OU Softball Team Had Trailed During Their NCAA Winning Streak? Not my fun fact for the day, but this is just amazing. So they have won 57 games in a row. I think they won the last 2 championships,
Yes.
if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Of course, they've continued to win and are 4-0 this week. During the 57 games, and one game this year, they were behind. It was the 10th game in 57 during this winning streak where the Sooners trail, and they've only trailed after the 3rd inning 5 times. That's how amazing this is.
Yeah.
It's just it floors me that they're, teams with that level of winning streak. I'd love to know how many other teams in softball history in the NCAA have had that level of winning streak, but or close to it. Like, I think they own the record, but
yeah,
how amazing would that be to do that, and to only trail after the 3rd inning, as he said, 7 innings, Titan game, 5 times in 57 games. It absolutely amazing, and hopefully we can pull one of those off. We'll see.
Yeah,
But
I mean, to put in. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you put it in perspective.
I mean, just to put in perspective how good this team is, the last 2 seasons, they've played 124 softball games. They are 120-4 in the last 2 seasons. Like, that's insane. Last year, they went 61-1. They lost 1 game for an entire playing 62. Like, that is insane. Like, and I don't think people understand how difficult that is to do for softball, because it takes one swing of the bat can change the game. It's for softball.
Yeah.
Like, it's so, I mean, it's similar, I guess, to football, just a big play and it changes the outcome of the game. Like, it's so hard to be that dominant in this sport because there's a lot of great teams. But yeah, it's just 120-4. That's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and this, I'm looking at the schedule. Like, we have back-to-back series against Oklahoma State in Stillwater, and then Texas in Orlando.
Yeah.
Basically 6 games in a row versus top 5.
Yes.
2 teams both in the top 5. It really is amazing. But softball isn't the only sport that is doing some big things or having some success. Is that a good enough segue, Alan? Should I just go right into the other sports updates?
Yeah, I mean, might as well go right into the other sports. That was a great softball update, though.
Yeah, I know, and it's exciting. There's a lot of great things to think about there. So UCF women's hoops, we have 3 updates because of when we're recording this. We did lose to Cincinnati 67-61. It was another tight game that we kind of lost at the end, but we did get our 3rd conference win with a 69-64 victory over Texas Tech. They also were following with the men's basketball team. They were traveling, it sounds like, together because they played BYU this week as we recorded. Before we started recording early tonight, they lost a tough one at BYU, 64-60. Why is that tough? We won 3 out of the 4 quarters and got shellacked in the 3rd quarter. I think it was like 23-6 BYU. And so we were doing well for most of the game, and we even fought back in the 4th quarter, but just couldn't, kind of like we were talking about in the men's basketball, can't get over the top. And I feel like our women's basketball team will start getting there and moving and doing better things over time, maybe even through the rest of the year. Now, another team that is doing historic things at UCF is the men's tennis team. They beat Miami 4-3 for the best start in program history. They are 7-0. The women's tennis team is playing number 19 Tennessee next, and UCF baseball begins their season Friday against Bryant.
All right,
that's the other updates, and I'm not going to lie. We're talking a little bit on the side here. We're doing this game, as I said, live, and this is just a interesting game where we were down big, got back into it, down big, kind of in this middle right now. So we're still down, but it feels like the energy is a little bit back. And it seems that Allen and Johnson have scored at this point because they had 0 points at the half. So those are other sports updates in the middle of other sports updates.
Yeah, no, the game is going on right now. There is 12 minutes left. UCF is fighting, and they're keeping the game somewhat close. But that was a good update there on UCF's other sports. So it looks like we just have really kind of one more segment left, which is the Oxymoronic stat of the week and Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week. So
Woo!
This week it's not really oxymoronic. I don't know if it ever is, but kind of
mine aren't funny.
Right. I mentioned earlier, and going to kind of turn this a little bit into a quiz question, Josh style, but I alluded to it that UCF with tonight's game against BYU had 4 straight ranked opponents. I looked and I couldn't find in any other sport. I might not have looked at like, I don't know, golf or something like that. But I looked at most of the Olympic sports, and UCF has never faced 4 straight ranked opponents in any sport. However, the closest they got to it was in football. Do you know the 3 opponents in a row they faced that were ranked in football?
Is it the 2017 team with Auburn at the end?
Yes, it is.
I thought it was. It was nice. Memphis. It was Memphis. Was that other team ranked?
USF was ranked in the AP that year. Yeah, so I'm looking at the AP. They weren't in the Cows weren't in the CFP ranking, but they were number, I think it was 24 or 23 in the AP when we faced them.
Yeah, that was. Trey can tell me from a fan perspective, those are the 3 best games I went to. There's very few games that live up to that. I mean, maybe the Cincinnati double noise penalty game day was at least up there when it comes to the enthusiasm. But it's and I think we could have an entire recording on Mike Hughes and that return from 40 different million perspectives.
Oh yeah.
But I've never lost my voice so many times in like a month and a half. How about that?
Wow, it was so much fun.
That's what I enjoyed it the most. I think it was like all the ups and downs and we're about to win. Oh my gosh, we're about to look. Like I think that's what makes it, like, to me, that was what made it the most fun. Even just playing, because those emotions flow on the sidelines, not necessarily from, I didn't feel that way. I was always trying to just remain level-headed no matter what. But man, I mean, you would come to the sidelines and guys would be like the life just went out of them. Then you'd come back to the sidelines and they're crying. Like, so we felt those exact same emotions everybody in the stands did. Like, a lot of those guys felt it. So I've always thought, to me, that stretch, those last 3 games were probably the most fun just because of that part of it.
And that season was so much fun too, just because you look at maybe some other undefeated teams in college football history, and like you have like some teams like Alabama and where they just beat the breakouts off of every single team, and it wasn't fun. Like our year had a nice mix of like, okay, these games are in the bag, like we crushed teams and it was never a contest, but it was just fun to watch them run up the score. But then you had those like nail biter, like you really earned the victory.
Like Navy. Overtime. I know people forget about like that Navy game,
and,
man.
Like, it was tackle and
like people forget. I will not forget, but like that was a huge game. Yeah, it's overlooked because that last 3 stretch, which I get it, but like that game was crazy. SMU, like those away games, people gave us our best shots because at the time, you don't know at the time, but looking back, we were kind of like the pop star team of the country. Like people came to see us play because they wanted to beat us, but like it was entertaining to watch us play. Like SMU, that Navy, just that back end stretch, just everything that went into it, because again, that rain out hurricane, it was tough, but I think that's what made it fun also because of that, like you said, Alan. So
the cardiac nights there at the end. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I think that's why there are people clamoring to see Scott Frost back, at least as an offensive coordinator or somewhere in college football, because there are just some schemes and offensive amazing offensive play that they remember from Oregon, from UCF, and we're
Yeah.
hoping to see it in Nebraska, right? I mean,
Yeah. Seriously.
it has a place. It absolutely does.
It's so like it's fun to watch it. Like even if again it didn't work out at Nebraska, but like you said, Oregon, the offense was always fun to watch as a fan. You know, even looking from afar, we always were like, "Oh, that Oregon offense is exciting." You know, and then coming back to when he was at UCF, if it was one thing about it, we're gonna have an exciting offense. We're gonna have all these players running fast, open, making like it's exciting. So I think people when I always say the bar was set almost unrealistic with that time period. Like it's not realistic to get to that, and I think, you're going to run into the same thing at Alabama with Nick Saban. Like if you guys are expecting this coach to be Nick Saban, he's going to disappoint you because that's not a realistic bar, So I think we have a little bit of that, with Coach Frost. And I think people were expecting that at Nebraska. And I'm like, it was a flash in the pan. Like it was the perfect timing, the perfect everything. Like I don't think he could truthfully, I don't think he could come back to UCF and get that exact thing again. I truly don't think he could because it was the perfect combination of, O'Leary guys and his guys. And then, us gelling and, it's too hard. It's like you said, Alan, it's too hard. I mean, we tried it the next year and we were 12-0, but we finished 12-1 just because, and that was almost another perfect season, but just to show how hard it is to do it twice.
And it doesn't hurt that it's all that, and then McKenzie execute. Not the only person, but Casey.
He's the point guard. He's the point guard.
Yeah, he executed to an insane level too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, as you said, we kind of lightning the bottle, but that to me is like. You have teams like that every year, but that to me is college football at its best. Like
yes,
that's what makes like in the NFL, like it's extremely rare to get in even in the 40s, but like in college football, like a team like 2017 UCF or like 2014 Oregon or whatever it was when they had like Mariota, like when you could put up like 70 like that, or like even Baylor when we faced them in 2013, they scored like 70 like 4 times that year. Like that to me is college football at its best, and it's so much fun when you see that. Exactly. And like that's what I want to see. I'm not trying to see some defensive battle. Like
I mean, that's what the fan wants. That's what I like to see. Like the player in me enjoys like the nuances of the scheme and I like defense. But casually watching, I love watching high scoring games because it's fun. It's fun to see. It's fun to see him score touchdowns, do touchdown dances. Like that's fun. That's what it's about.
Well, let's think of the Super Bowl, right? The first half of the Super Bowl was pretty good, but it was a bit of a defensive battle, and the second half got better. Why? Better. People kept scoring, and there was still good defense, and there was still good defense too.
Yeah.
Yep. No doubt about it. All right, so let's get into, I guess, the final segments here, right? Final
one.
My students will like. Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. I talk about it all the time. Okay, so I have a sometimes funny fact. This might be a little bit of a layup, but we'll see because we don't have everyone on the podcast today. So we are going to be playing Cincinnati coming up pretty soon. And Cincinnati in basketball has a former UCF Knight on their team. So this former Knight has now played us will now have played us 3 different times. Actually, this will be coming up on the 4th. So who is that a former UCF basketball player? And what is the record of their play versus UCF?
Wait, he was on the team you said 3 years ago?
So this basketball player was on the team 2 years ago and was on a UCF Knight for 2 years. Left to go to one other team, which we played in conference, kind of a hint. And then we are playing them in this next conference when they moved to Cincinnati as a senior.
Did he play at ECU?
He did not.
Okay. Oh, man. I don't know.
Me either.
Yeah, that might have been Ben. Ben might have.
That's a Ben.
That's a Ben
A
question.
Ben or Roger question. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, you get who you get, and the listener doesn't care. So that is Jameel Reynolds. So Jameel Reynolds
I remember
was
Jameel Reynolds.
yeah.
Temple,
he was
right?
for 2 years. He went to Temple, correct? And Temple beat us twice that year. And of course, as you know, Cincinnati has beaten us once. So Jameel is now 3-0 versus UCF.
Wow.
And we're going to make that 3-1 hopefully next time up. So that's the never a funny fact of the week.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh. I think that's it, boys. Do we have any final thoughts here?
I will tell you we are this BYU game. I'm going to pop this on right after we're done recording, because this has been a whirlwind of a game. Down 14, down 4, down 20, down 8.
Right.
We're getting to the bonus. There's like 9 minutes left. I don't know how this game is going to end, but at the end of the day, regardless of what happens, I still think I'm excited for basketball. I'd love to see how tennis continues to win, or even if they don't, how far they can get. There's golf coming up. The women's teams are slowly getting their role, especially in basketball. This is a pretty exciting time to be in the non-football era of UCF sports, and I can't wait to see what happens in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I'm with Josh. I think this is going to be, this is the exciting time as a UCF fan. It's not just football dominant, where it overshadows almost everything. We had a good season, but there's teams that are having better years, and I think that's what kind of rounds up. That to me makes what the college is about. You can be a great football school. Are you a good school? Like, are you a school that everybody wants to come to? And I think we're headed that direction, and I hope we can continue building on it, because like I said, when I was there, yeah, football was good. Softball was winning conference championships. Baseball was a solid team. And I think that's what we need. Basketball was right there turning the corner with Aubrey Dawkins and BJ and Taco. Like, that's what I think, women's soccer too. I think like that's what, if we can do that and keep building, it's special for everybody, not just for football. It's special for all the athletes and the fans to just show support. And, here we are, for me, 10 years later, in the same scenario. Can these guys, hopefully we can execute and catapult us to where we want to be. So I think it's a great time, to be a UCF fan. If you want to jump on the bandwagon, now's the time to do it. Don't do it when everybody's winning. You got to do it when the times aren't as high as, whenever we're always in the limelight. Do it now. So.
Yep. My final thoughts are, I agree. Great time to be a UCF fan. And it is exciting because, we obviously had football in the fall, and like you said, it went okay. But now all the Olympic sports right now in the spring, these are all of these teams' first time playing in the Big 12. So it's kind of like we're reliving what we kind of did with UCF football, where all these games in basketball and upcoming baseball and softball, they're all just kind of new opponents, teams we haven't played ever, really. Some have never played before. So it's exciting, and we'll see what happens here, mainly with basketball as the season comes to its conclusion. All right, guys, that was another good episode. So as always, like, subscribe, and charge on.
Charge on.
Charge on, baby.
Like, subscribe, and grind, and charge on. You have to do it all the way to the end. And Roger isn't paying attention now because he's watching the BYU game. Yep. So he's going to let me go on and on